The E90 represents the 5th generation of BMW 3 Series. As the replacement for the beloved E46, the E90 had a lot to prove and a serious hurdle to overcome the near-perfect dynamics of its predecessor. I'll save the thorough comparison to the older E46 for a separate video. However, the E90 was a definite step forward in terms of performance and technology. Being a 2011, this 335i xDrive is the end of the road for the E90, being replaced in 2012 by the F80. This means that the E90 is facelifted and equipped with the twin-scroll turbo N55 versus the twin-turbo N54 found in earlier 335s. I'll go over the interior and styling a little bit later in the video, but for now, let's go for a drive. I really love how versatile this car is. It's fast, it's packed with technology, it's great in the snow, it's comfortable, it does a little bit of everything that I need it to. I'm typically such a huge proponent of naturally aspirated cars. I mean, it's really the only type of engine that I've really owned. I've had a 545, I have the Z4M, a couple different E46s. So this is my first turbocharged BMW, and it's really starting to win me over. I mean, it's such a rewarding engine, and I really wasn't expecting it to be. Around town, you enjoy the 300 pound-feet of torque from a frankly ridiculous 1200 RPM. So from way down in the power band, you're getting a big torque shove, and that makes it a really nice car to drive every day because you never feel like you have to beat on this thing to get acceleration and get up to speed. Now, despite this engine being turbocharged, there's not a whole lot of lag, and that's because BMW used a smaller twin-scroll unit, and it reduces that lag pretty drastically. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't naturally aspirated. There's still a bit of a hesitation. Floor it, there's 100%. So it's maybe half a second. And you do just get used to it. You adapt your driving style to account for that little hesitation while the turbo builds boost. And to be totally honest with you, with a turbocharged car, I think I want at least a little bit of that lag just because it reminds you what it is. It's fun. It's not a naturally aspirated car. It's a different driving experience. As far as power levels go, it's 300 horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque, which is a really healthy number for stock. And the entire time, the stock exhaust on this N55 sounds really good. I've got to say, that's one of the more surprising things about this car for me. When I first started it up and I heard the cold start, I was like, whoa, I really can't believe that this is just the stock mufflers. And actually, this is not even as loud as you could get them stock. There's a BMW Performance exhaust option that sounds even better than this, and it's even louder, which is pretty impressive. It's this car's giant power band that makes it so much fun on a daily basis because almost all of the engine's power is available to you almost all the time. So you're never having to really worry about what gear you're in, whether the speed, it just doesn't matter. You put your foot down, and there it is. The interior of the E90 3 Series is an extremely nice place to be. This car is fully loaded with navigation, which features a fairly modern rendition of BMW's iDrive system, wonderful Harman Kardon sound system, heated seats and steering wheel, and Bluetooth audio. Despite all the tech, my favorite thing about the E90 is the build quality. This 2011 has over 120,000 miles on it, and there's zero signs of wear in here. The attention to detail in terms of material choice is also impressive. Areas that you'd expect to be hard plastic, like the bottom of the doors, are actually soft to the touch. Also, all of the switchgear and buttons have a satisfying tactile feel, and they seem like they're going to last a long time. I also love these seats. They're comfortable on long trips, but they're more than supportive enough to hold you in when you're driving quickly. Especially in this saddle brown or other interesting colors, the interior has aged very well and still looks modern. Now let's talk for a moment about this automatic. For me, it was the right choice and I know that if you want the sportiest option, or say this is going to be your only car and you want it to be as fun as possible, you're going to want the stick. That's just how it is. It's just going to be more involving and more fun to drive. But if it's going to be your daily driver, maybe your second car, you really should consider driving one of the automatics, because it's not bad. Considering the vintage, this is a 2011, and it being a 6-speed ZF, I was expecting it to be slower than this. I've driven quite a few automatics of this kind of time period, and they're never that impressive. And if they do have paddle shifters, they're not responsive at all. This really isn't like that. For a stock transmission, because you can tune these, it's pretty responsive. The paddles, obviously there's a bit of hesitation. It's not dual clutch, but it works well enough where you'll actually want to use the paddles. And again, for me personally, it just gives a great balance between luxury daily driver and involving performance car. I can slap it over into manual mode and start using the paddles on a back road, but if I'm stuck in traffic, I just pop it back into D and forget about it. I've really only got 2 gripes with this transmission. One is really very annoying to me, and it's when you have it in manual mode, it will still downshift to the lowest gear if you hit the kick down pedal. And to me, when you're in manual mode with paddle shifters, it should not be doing anything for you. Now this xDrive model, because of the additional differential and drivetrain hardware, weighs 3,800 pounds thereabouts. And that's enough where you notice it when you get onto a twisty road. You definitely feel the heft of it, but it's not bad. It just feels more like a grand touring car than a sports car. And coming from an all-wheel drive E46, which is a couple hundred pounds lighter, it definitely feels bigger and heavier than the E46. So if you want something that's going to be a bit more nimble, you might want to look at the older cars, honestly. You'll forfeit a bit of performance, a bit of speed, but you might gain that agility that you want. For me, the trade-off to get the faster car and the more advanced and luxurious interior was worthwhile, but to you it may not be. For me, the E90 strikes a perfect balance in terms of ride quality when it comes to luxury and performance. It's not going to beat you up on a bumpy road, but when you get onto your favorite section of back road, it still performs well enough and has enough body control where you can have a lot of fun. Now I should also note that because this is an xDrive, you couldn't option the sport suspension. So everything that I've just told you is actually just on the base xDrive suspension. And that's pretty impressive. So if you had a 335i that had the sport suspension without the all-wheel drive, you can imagine that it would be an even sportier ride. And that's where I think you would get into more of a typical sports sedan feel, whereas this is more of that grand touring car kind of feel, where it's very capable, but it's not necessarily my first choice for bombing down a back road. That would be where my Z4M comes in. As far as the steering is concerned, it's nice and direct, and it's actually a little heavier than I would have expected from a car like this. And that's pretty pleasing. It adds to that kind of sporty sensation. There's not a ton of feel from it like an older BMW. Like my E46, I would say that the steering was less direct but had a bit more feel. One of my favorite things about the way this car drives is a combination of all of its characteristics. So the all-wheel drive system and that low-end torque, when you come into a tight corner, you can just feel it, all of it working together to scramble and pull through that. And it's part of why you can drive it so quickly, so easily. My weekend toy is a Z4M, it's an 06, and it's the opposite of this in a lot of ways. You have to work very hard to extract the performance from that car. Whereas in this, I could probably keep up with my Z4M on most back roads, but it's just going to be a lot less involving to drive while you do that. The person in the Z4M is going to be having a lot more fun extracting the performance from it rather than this, because it's just easier. With the all-wheel drive and that low-end torque and the paddle shifters, there's not a whole lot that you're having to do as a driver to really extract that performance. Whereas in the Z4, you're managing oversteer, you're managing heel-toe downshifts, and the real edginess of that car's handling. Just don't expect it to rival that pure driving experience that you get from a purpose-built sports car like a Z4M, an M3, or a Porsche Cayman. It's just not designed for that. This fully loaded 2011 335i xDrive has 120,000 miles, and it was only a little over $10,000.
Especially when optioned in this manner, I really can't imagine how I own this car for what I paid. The amount of value that you're getting from money here is frankly ridiculous. I've always owned older, naturally aspirated cars like my E46 or Z4M. However, this E90 has shown me that although I love those old school experiences, the turbocharged present that we're living in is pretty damn good too.